Welcome back to the Common Sense Crypto channel, everyone. This is Rich making another video on XRP today, as usual. So, wherever you are in this vast planet, I hope you're all having a nice day today. We are going to discuss XRP. The Ripple v. SEC lawsuit has been the subject of much conjecture lately. Additionally, many individuals insisted that the case was still ongoing and would be postponed once more. Everything that transpired is finally explained by Brad Garlinghouse. Listen to it. The complaint against Ripple, she claimed, was still pending. Now where is it? Because we began to hear last night that it might be going extinct. After reaching a consensus with the staff, the typical course of action is for the staff to present recommendations to the commission, which are then put to a vote. We are therefore certain that we have reached a consensus with the personnel whenever we make announcements regarding that. We have decided to dismiss and go on, but the commission has not yet cast a vote. The SEC is literally threatening to punish us $125 million because we put money in escrow. In fact, we're returning the majority of it, including the interest accrued over the process, and I believe it's just proof that the prior Gensler SEC was breaking the law. I believe we're witnessing a much more positive and pro-innovation environment as a result of the new leadership at the White House and the SEC. We seek domestic growth in these businesses. What's left over when you mention that the majority of the $125 million you have saved in that small fund is for the worst case situation? Are you able to provide us with some? The SAC will receive $50 million in the end. $50 million will be given to the US government. We've even discussed releasing that in XRP. But let's face it, this is a significant advancement. I believe that if you take a closer look at this, the Trump administration is definitely fulfilling its promises. I believe Paul Atkins was confirmed yesterday, and David Sachs is spearheading the campaign at the White House with Scott Bessent. These individuals are concerned with ways to ensure that, with reasonable regulation and common sense, this industry may flourish domestically. And for the past 4 years, we haven't had that. What kind of common sense regulation would you like to see? Have you had a conversation with David Sachs? If so, what was said? Hey David, this should at least be the main focus. Legislation pertaining to stablecoins and what is commonly referred to as a market structure law are the two initiatives with the greatest traction on Capitol Hill. Legislation pertaining to stablecoins, since it is yet unclear whether banks are engaged when they are not and what type of licensing is suitable. We believe that the New York Department of Financial Services New York Trust License, which Ripple just obtained to launch our stablecoin, is the gold standard for market regulation. However, it is crucial to have federal regulation that gives big entities like USDC Circle and Tether certainty. I believe that will happen sooner rather than later. President Trump, there were 3 things Brad clarified. First of all, they reached a consensus among SAC employees. The staff will now present it to the commission, which will then vote on it. The Ripple v. SEC litigation will then come to an end. We are still awaiting that. Additionally, he stated that they might be paying the U.S. government the $50 million XRP penalties. Perhaps this is the reason why the U.S. government has some XRP in the stockpile they mentioned. He continued by discussing the significance of a stablecoin bill. He fastened it to the banks as well. He believes that many opportunities at the banks will arise from a stablecoin. He's saying that to you, and I've been saying it the entire time. Certain doors simply cannot yet be opened by XRP. Although many banks are still unsure about cryptocurrency, they would undoubtedly pave the way for a reliable coin. They begin to recognize the worth later in something like XRP that can quickly and affordably transfer that stablecoin from here in the US to, say, the UK or the EU. However, you must begin somewhere. And after all the rumors that have been circulating about X for the last 2 weeks, we finally know what is happening with the Ripple against SEC case. This is something that central banks detest. These 3 decentralized, disruptive, and moon-ready altcoins have the potential to transform $1,000 into $250,000 in the event of a US dollar collapse. Indeed, one of those altcoins is XRP, but That's why cryptocurrency is so great. You can invest a small amount of money and end up with a huge sum. And at the moment, XRP appears to be quite strong. Ethereum is also a target for everyone because should it truly take off, it will be the first indication in the cryptocurrency world that alt season is about to commence. However, what if XRP is what ushers in the alt season this time around rather than Ripple? That is certainly possible. For XRP, there are a lot more catalysts than for Ethereum. Compared to Ethereum, XRP is much more in demand. And since XRP has so far outperformed both Ethereum and Bitcoin in this run, I believe it will continue. XRP was held by banks in 2021, silently. The Basel Committee revealed that 19 big banks had $9.4 billion in cryptocurrency at the time, including $188 million in XRP or 2% of their overall exposure, while the SEC was classifying it as a security. Yes, they included 10 banks in the United States. This occurred when legal ambiguity was at its highest. These banks did not place bets. They were setting up. JP Morgan was, in my opinion, one of the banks that most likely was positioned early on. They anticipated that XRP will cause significant disruptions to their business strategy. They attempted to obtain some of the escrow by entering Ripple's offices for that reason. However, Ripple told them to shut up. The Ripple v. ECC litigation began as a result. For as long as possible, the banks wished to keep this cryptocurrency hidden. However, the banks were undoubtedly lining up because they were aware of this impending event. The XRP ledger has been solving issues since day one and is the tool of the century. Here, XRP would be part of a huge liquidity pool. The stablecoins that would be coming in and going out of it throughout the day were then visible. When these infographics were created, people were posting these kinds of memes every day. People didn't truly get it back then. And even if they realized it, they believed it would take decades. As of right now, I believe Ripple is poised to launch another reliable coin in the UK that, in my opinion, will be the next RL coin launch. For example, we have RLUSD, definitely in the EU, if not there. However, Ripple has always planned to do this from the beginning. Back when they first started out, that was their goal. According to Jamie Dimon's 2025 shareholder letter, things may worsen before they improve. The result is likely to be a recession. The banks are also aware that they are having issues. Listen to what this former central banker has to say about a crisis that caught them off guard. And it has become more and more apparent to me over the years that every time a major financial crisis occurs, it is in a developing economy, whether it is in the United States, Europe, or another country. It is going to involve the central bank. It will undoubtedly have to deal with the consequences. And each time it occurs, people get forward and say, let's do something, as though it were a total surprise. They don't take planning and readiness into account, and they don't appear to understand that a financial crisis is imminent and is most likely being overseen by those in authority at the moment. They should therefore be prepared. They ought to be practicing. They ought to be maintaining price stability while speculating on how they will act in a manner that is actually very different from how they act in their regular business as usual. Thus, they are already aware that the next catastrophe is imminent. I believe that the banking system is going to experience a severe liquidity crisis. However, we were aware of this